Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Last day of 2024, the Americans are entering the new year with a MAGA war. What started with hateful posts against an Indian-American appointee of Donald Trump turned into a debate over H-1B visas and has now spiraled into racism and Hinduphobia, which means 2025 brings questions and uncertainty for Indian Americans. In China too, President Xi Jinping is talking about uncertainty. He says there will be challenges ahead. We will bring you the highlights of his New Year's speech. In Bangladesh, they're getting ready to welcome the Pakistani army for the first time since 1971. What does this mean for India? Also in focus, what is Donald Trump's peace plan for Ukraine and why has Putin rejected it? What is India's first space docking mission? With Boeing under the scanner over safety concerns, what can you as a consumer do? Can India save a nurse from Kerala who's got the death sentence in Yemen? Why has Trinidad and Tobago declared an emergency? How to survive a New Year's Eve party and a year-end special. Meet the class of 2025. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. France bombs the Islamic State's military positions in Syria. It's the first such strike on the country since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Rafale fighter jets and Reaper drones dropped 7 bombs in central Syria. The US has also doubled its troops in the country amid fears that the Islamic State could try to take advantage of the turmoil in Syria. A South Korean court issues an arrest warrant for impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon is being probed for declaring martial law on the 3rd of December. Investigators requested the warrant after Yoon skipped questioning for the 3rd time. The impeached president faces criminal charges of insurrection, which could result in life imprisonment or even the death penalty. In India, Manipur Chief Minister apologizes amid continuing ethnic violence. Biren Singh urges the people to forget past mistakes. He hails the progress made in the last few months and hopes the new year brings peace and calm to the northeastern state. Manipur has been battling ethnic violence since May 2023. China denies claims of cyber attack on the US Treasury, calls the allegations groundless. This incident happened earlier this month. The attack resulted in access to some of the US Treasury's workstations. Many countries have voiced alarm over alleged Beijing-backed hacking targeting their governments. And Venezuela fines TikTok $10 million. The penalty is over viral challenges that left 3 adolescents dead. TikTok is owned by China's ByteDance. The company has 8 days to pay the fine or face appropriate measures. It started off as a debate on visas, but it's now a full-blown racist meltdown. Far-right Republicans are on a rampage. Their target is the Indian-American community. And we've seen all the usual tropes. Go back to your country, pray to your pagan gods, wrestle around in mud and eat curry, typical of America's far-right. Even their insults are not too bright. But it does reveal a deeper problem with American society, especially a section of Donald Trump supporters. They hate anyone who is not white. They also hate anyone who is not a Christian. Some Indian American lawmakers are trying to fight this. Among them is Sri Thanedar, a Democratic congressman from Michigan. Listen to what he said, and I'm quoting, "Racism in America is still alive and well, and we must stand up to it together. That's why I introduced a bipartisan resolution condemning all Hinduphobia." Well, he's absolutely right. To prove it, let's look at the replies to the same post. This is what people have written. People with the name Sri Thanedar should not be in the government. Racism is good. It preserves bloodlines and cultural heritages. Leave willingly or leave it to chance, you are no American and never could be. As they say in maths, hence proved. And just to be clear, it's not just Hindu Indians. Muslims, Christians and Sikhs from India also migrate to the United States, and they too are facing racism. So ideally, any law should target anti-India racism. Having said that, we have seen a worrying trend recently, a spike in attacks on the Hindu faith. It started around the time Vivek Ramaswamy ran for president. He is a big supporter of Donald Trump, yet the MAGA crowd never welcomed him. Do you know why? Because Ramaswamy is a Hindu and not a Christian. Take a look at this video from October. It shows a far-right supporter questioning Vivek Ramaswamy. Listen in.
And God has a name, and Hinduism is a wicked pagan religion, and it's completely incompatible with America.
So the question of whether or not somebody of a non-Christian faith can embody and lead the United States of America at any meaningful level is an open question. The only point I would make to those who are listening as students, and I'm glad you're stepping up and asking a challenging question. I would advise you to next time leave the disingenuous accusations of motivation to one side, because there's a more interesting exchange for us to have. If you believe that Thomas Jefferson as a deist is somebody who would have been unqualified to be U.S. president, then I guess you and I see the future of the United States of America differently.
He says Hinduism is a wicked pagan religion, and he said that to Vivek Ramaswamy's face. And he saw the response, pretty meek to be honest. Ramaswamy did not directly defend his faith. Instead, he called it a difference of opinion. What's worse, he described it as a challenging question. But it's not, is it? Calling another religion wicked is not an opinion. It is hateful and insulting. Yet Vivek Ramaswamy smiled away and answered the question. So he is part of the problem too. And so is Donald Trump. This is a man who made a career out of villainizing migrants, out of targeting black and brown people. So is it surprising that his supporters hate Indian Americans? Frankly, it's on point for them. I've got some more evidence for you. On Sunday, a social media account started running a poll. The question was quite simple. Would Americans rather have illegal Mexicans or legal Indians? More than 40,000 votes have been cast. And look at the results. Nearly 82% preferred illegal Mexicans. Only 18% said legal Indians. First of all, congratulations to all the Trump fanboys in India. You're finally meeting the real Trump fans. And newsflash, they hate you. But more importantly, what's the way forward? The Trump team has asked its nominees to be silent. They're asking them to not comment on the H-1B visas. The Indian government is also on alert. Reports say they are reaching out to IT firms and business chambers. Like we said yesterday, the problem is clarity. No one knows what to expect next month. Donald Trump has said that he likes the H-1B program, but his far-right advisors do not like it. For example, Steve Bannon. He was Trump's advisor during the first term. He says H-1B should be scrapped. Forget reforming or reducing the cap. Bannon says cancel the whole thing. Even Elon Musk appears to be backpedaling now. A few days ago, he promised to go to war over H-1B visas. Now he says the program is broken. He wants the H-1B to be reformed. And this is going to be a big issue going forward. Almost 72% of H-1B beneficiaries are Indians. More than 1 million Indians are in line for a green card, which is basically permanent residency in the US. All of them are in a limbo right now. Donald Trump should address both these issues immediately. First, spell out his exact policy on H-1B, and second, shut down the racist trolls. Remember, this whole thing started after Trump picked a new AI advisor, an Indian American named Sri Ramakrishnan. MAGA Republicans have abused and insulted Krishnan, yet Donald Trump has not said a word. It is moments like these that define character and leadership. Trump has exhibited neither so far.
Xi 我在北京向大家致以美好的祝福。
亲切握手，畅想重新出海和热烈友情。
It's New Year's Eve. Most of the world is eagerly waiting for 2025. What will the new year bring us? How will we tackle the challenges and opportunities ahead? For most of us, the answers to these questions come from self-reflection. But that's not the case in China, because there the answers are given to the people, shoved down their throats by their president Xi Jinping, who has an annual tradition. He gives a speech every New Year's Eve. He tells his people what to expect and what to do in the year ahead. And Xi delivered his speech a few hours ago. Most of it was business as usual, a rerun of his greatest hits. He said no one can stop China's reunification with Taiwan. He says this every year, but this year the message was softer, we thought. He did not threaten to invade. He did not dial up the rhetoric. Instead, this is what he said.
Chinese people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are one family. No one can sever our blood ties, and no one can stop the historical trend of the reunification of the motherland.
This is a far cry from last year's message. Back then, he was amping up tensions, threatening war because Taiwan was going to polls. Xi Jinping wanted to scare Taiwan, scare the people into voting out the incumbent government. It did not work. But Xi Jinping is not the type to change his ways. He did not threaten this year, not because he's had a change of heart. Most likely not. He just has bigger fish to fry at the moment. He needs to deal with his own economy first. Xi Jinping spent a good amount of time talking about China's economy. He insisted that it was on an upward trajectory. He highlighted the electric vehicle industry in particular. He said China has produced 10 million EVs for the first time this year. It was a matter of pride for him. Though he conveniently left out that the market was facing headwinds, with the European Union slapping tariffs on Chinese EVs. But this was his New Year's speech. I suppose it was more about vibes than hard facts. And it's not just European tariffs that he's going to be wary of. Next year will usher in the second Donald Trump presidency in the US, and Trump has promised blanket tariffs on Chinese goods, ranging from 10 to a whopping 60%. Xi Jinping knows that this is coming, and he acknowledged the difficulties that lie ahead. Most of his speech was sunshine and rainbows, but a small part acknowledged the thunderstorm ahead. In fact, here's a rough translation of what he said. The Chinese economy now faces some new conditions, including challenges of uncertainties in the external environment and pressure to transform from old growth drivers into new ones. But we can prevail with our hard work. As always, we grow in the wind and rain, and we get stronger through hard times. We must be confident. That was Xi's attempt to reassure his citizens. It said a storm is coming, but China will be able to get by with hard work. Let's look beyond the motivational pep talk and try and decode what he means. He mentioned uncertainties in the external environment. Take that to mean external factors outside his control, which is probably a reference to Donald Trump and the tariffs he's going to impose. He says these uncertainties put pressure on China, forcing it to switch from old growth drivers to new ones. What were China's old growth drivers? A key driver was exports. The export of cheap Chinese goods to the US and other Western nations. This has been powering China's growth for years, but exports will nosedive once the Trump tariffs kick in. So what then? Well, that's where Xi Jinping's new growth drivers come into play. If the US market is closed, China will have to find other markets, new export destinations. The rest of the world, especially the global south, should get ready for this. We may become dumping grounds for Chinese goods. Other than exports, China doesn't have much going well at the moment. Domestic demand is still subdued. The property sector is still in a mess. Beijing tried to address these issues over the last few months. They introduced an economic stimulus package, which helped steady the ship a bit. But the stimulus won't be enough to power them in 2025, and Xi Jinping knows that. And that is what he's getting his people ready for. That's the key takeaway from today's speech. Let me take you back to December 16, 1971. History was being made in Dhaka. Pakistani soldiers surrendered to India after 13 days of fighting, and the result was this picture. Arguably the most famous in India's military history. This is the picture we're talking about. It shows Pakistan's Eastern Commander signing the instrument of surrender. With that, 93,000 Pakistani soldiers surrendered, the biggest since World War II. Afterwards, these soldiers were taken to India. They had unleashed a bloodbath in Bangladesh, but they left defeated. Around 54 years later, Pakistan's army is returning to Bangladesh again, this time as partners. Reports say Dhaka and Islamabad have reached a deal. Senior Pakistani officers will visit Bangladesh in 2025. They will train soldiers in the Bangladesh army. Apparently, the program will start by February. And it's not an isolated move. A top Pakistani general is expected to visit Dhaka in the coming days. His name is Lieutenant General Sahir Shamshad Mirza. He is the chairman of Pakistan's Joint Chief of Staff Committee. Then in February, they have naval drills. Bangladesh will take part in Pakistan's Aman exercise. It's not a first, but still significant. Now, if you add all of this up, the takeaway is quite clear. Mohammad Yunus wants a defense partnership with Pakistan. He met Pakistan's Prime Minister recently. He talked about moving on from 1971. I guess this is how you move on. By hosting the same army that massacred and raped your people. The same army that refuses to apologize for it. And it fits perfectly with Yunus's foreign policy. He wants to reset ties with Pakistan. The question is, should India be concerned? The short answer is yes. New Delhi should be concerned about two things. First is indoctrination. We saw that in the aftermath of 1971. Bangladesh's generals were all trained in Pakistan, so most of them had an anti-India tilt. Not to mention a disdain for democracy. Just look at Ziaur Rahman and H.M. Irshad. Both of them had close ties to Pakistan's army, and both of them led military coups in Dhaka. The second concern is the security fallout, especially for India's northeast. In the 1990s, Pakistan's military used Bangladesh to funnel weapons to the region. These weapons would eventually end up with Indian separatists. And this time, it could be easier because Yunus has set up a direct sea bridge to Pakistan, meaning Pakistani ships can sail straight to Dhaka, no stopovers, no third country pit stops. Pakistani cargo can sail directly to Bangladesh, which makes smuggling easier. These are the two main concerns for India, but equally worrying is the erasure of history. This attempt to create a new Bangladesh. Some student groups are leading this charge. They organized a march for unity today in Dhaka. It may sound pretty benign, but the initial plan was very different. The students wanted to declare the July protests a revolution. There was talk of demanding a new republic, to scrap Bangladesh's constitution and write a new one. Thankfully, none of that has happened. The student leaders opted for a march instead of proclaiming a revolution. It is a relief, but it's temporary. Yunus will face much bigger challenges in 2025. He made the mistake of obsessing over Bangladesh's past. He tried to rewrite his country's history. But now there are too many writers. The students want a revolutionary regime. The radicals want an Islamist regime. And the political parties want immediate elections. It promises to be a tumultuous year for Dhaka. Let's see how it unfolds. Will the war in Ukraine end in 2025? Donald Trump is confident it will. In fact, he's promised to end it in one day. It's one of his top priorities. He has vowed to broker a deal between Ukraine and Russia.
He should be prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal too.
He has a point. Too many people are being killed. Putin and Zelensky have to make a deal. The only problem is Putin is not game. He doesn't like the deal that Trump is offering. Says who? Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He has given an interview, and on Putin's behalf, he has rejected Trump's proposals. We are not happy. That's what Lavrov said. But not happy with what? As far as we know, there is no draft on the table. Donald Trump is yet to spell out his plan. He just keeps saying he will get the deal done. But what is that deal? A formal proposal is expected only after Trump takes office. As of now, there are just some ideas that Trump and his team have floated. And one of them is about Ukraine's NATO bid. Trump wants Zelensky to defer it by at least 20 years. Meaning, don't try to seek NATO membership for at least 2 decades. That's one idea. Another idea is deploying European troops in Ukraine. Trump has already discussed this with Macron and Zelensky. This happened last month in Paris when all the 3 leaders were there for the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. So here's what we have. No NATO membership for Ukraine for another 20 years and European troops in Ukraine. That broadly is what's being seen as Trump's proposal. And that is what Russia has rejected. Then what does Putin want? What kind of deal would he like? The kind which keeps the West out of Ukraine.
We need final legal agreements that will fix all the conditions for ensuring the security of the Russian Federation and, of course, the legitimate security interests of our neighbors, but in a context that will secure the impossibility of violating these agreements in an internationally legal manner.
Vladimir Putin himself has talked about legal guarantees. He is ready to negotiate with Trump, but he has 2 conditions. The first one is about Ukraine's territory. Russian forces occupy 20% of Ukraine today. Putin does not want to give this up. That's his first condition. And second, Ukraine's NATO bid. Putin wants Kiev to completely abandon it. Not a 20-year postponement, but completely scrapping the idea of NATO membership. Putin does not want Ukraine being drawn into the Western sphere of influence at all, nor does he want Western troops on Russia's doorstep. These are his 2 conditions. If Trump accepts, then Vladimir Putin may come to the talking table. What about Zelensky? Well, he's in no position to dictate terms, but where does he stand on these issues? In recent weeks, Zelensky has made a shift. He has hinted that he is open to discussing a deal. At the same time, he's been trying to win over Trump to gain some leverage during negotiations.
I think that President Trump is a strong man, and I want very much to have him on our side. For me, it's very important. I want to discuss with him more details about this war. I think it's very important because he was not in this war, because he was not the president. It's understandable. And I want to share with him more details.
The fact is, Ukraine is at the mercy of its Western backers. Without their weapons, it cannot fight Russia. So it will have to go with the deal that it's given. And that brings us to Donald Trump. How far is he prepared to go? Is he ready for Russia's counter demands? So far, Trump's aides have been focused only on Ukraine, on how to get Ukraine to negotiate. That's been their focus. They call it the carrot and stick approach. If Kiev agrees to talks, it gets more assistance from America. If it refuses, military aid could be cut off. That is the approach that Trump's team wants to take. But cutting military aid may not be enough because Putin wants more. He wants hard commitments. He wants long-term security guarantees from both the US and Europe. Now, Trump may be willing to give that, but can he push the Europeans to do the same? As of today, it looks tough. So Donald Trump's plan needs some work. To deliver peace, he will have to build consensus. He made it sound like a cakewalk, but it may turn out to be one of the toughest challenges of his presidency. We do hope he cracks it. The Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, is reaching for the stars. India has launched its first space docking mission. Docking is a process with 2 spacecraft. They are maneuvered into the same orbit, then brought closer together, and finally docked or joined together. Now, docking is crucial for space missions, but it's not easy. It requires joining 2 fast-moving heavy spacecraft in space. And ISRO plans to do just that. If successful, India will join a small elite group of nations. Which other countries are part of this club? And what would this mission mean for India's space ambitions? Here is a report.
3, 2, 1, 0. Plus 5 seconds. Lift off normal.
This is the workhorse, the PSLV rocket. It has blasted off as the Indian Space Research Organization shoots for the moon. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had previously announced plans to send a person to the moon by 2040. Now, ISRO is taking another step to fulfill that ambition. The space agency is trying to achieve an advanced technological feat with the Space Docking Experiment, or SpaceX. It's India's first space docking mission. Before we tell you about the mission, let's answer this. What is docking? It is a process in which two spacecraft are maneuvered into the same orbit. After this, they are brought closer and finally docked, meaning joined to each other. Docking is essential for missions. It is crucial to bring spacecraft or satellites together to achieve space missions. It's used to achieve shared mission objectives, to have multiple rocket launches, and it is pivotal for future space endeavors. The future missions that the space race is eyeing, like satellite servicing, in-space robots, and complex space station operations. But here's the catch. Docking may be important, but it's a difficult process. It requires two fast-moving and heavy spacecraft to come together in space. So far, only 3 nations have been able to do this: the United States, Russia, and China. They are the only ones to have developed and tested this capability. And now, India plans to join this elite club. India's mission involves deploying the spacecraft into a 470-kilometer circular orbit before the docking can take place. Now, around 15 minutes after the rocket launch, after the spacecraft had reached an altitude of around 480 kilometers, the mission's director called the launch successful.
I'm really happy to announce the successful accomplishment of the launch of PSLV C-60 for the SpaceX mission. The rocket has placed the satellites in the right orbit, which is 475 kilometer circular orbit.
And this is no small feat. Not just because this is India's first successful docking launch, but also because it's a display of India's space tech prowess. In a first for the country, the docking spacecraft were integrated and tested in India at a private Indian company, not a government body. So if this mission is successful, it will be a win for India on multiple fronts. The country should have an answer on January 7th. That's when the docking technology will be tested. Safe to say, a successful test will launch India farther ahead in the global space race.
Did you have a rough 2024? If you're spending the last day moping about a bad year, spare a thought for Boeing. The US aviation giant, 2024 was perhaps their worst year on record, full of turbulence. In January, a Boeing plane had a gaping hole mid-air. The reason was missing bolts. In March, their CEO, Dave Calhoun, stepped down, leaving the company leaderless in a year full of challenges. In June, their space business suffered setbacks. Boeing Starliner capsule malfunctioned, leaving 2 astronauts stuck in space. They had gone up for 10 days. It's been nearly 8 months and they're still there. In July, the company pleaded guilty to fraud conspiracy. This was related to 2 plane crashes, the fatal 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019. Then in September, Boeing workers went on strike. The company lost $5.5 billion. This strike continued for 7 weeks. And to end the year on a tragic note, on 29 December, a Jeju airplane crashed in South Korea. 179 people were killed. This too was a Boeing plane. Apparently, it faced some landing gear issues. The investigation is still underway. But the big picture looks quite bleak. 2024 was a nightmare for Boeing. And what lies ahead could be worse. Because it's not just plane crashes. Boeing is dealing with a collapse of trust. Back in the day, it was the gold standard for aviation. There was a saying, if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. This is a company that changed the way we fly. Yet 3 deadly crashes, multiple accidents, safety lapses, and zero accountability later, Boeing is now a dreaded name. So much so that people do not want to fly a Boeing plane. Which brings us to the question, what options do you have? Can you, as a consumer, choose to not fly Boeing? The answer is no. And I'll tell you why. You see, the aviation industry is a duopoly. That means there are only 2 major players, Boeing and Airbus. Together, they control over 90% of the commercial market, more than 90%. That means no matter what flight you take, it's either a Boeing or an Airbus. And why is it a duopoly? Because building planes is tough. It's not like making cars or phones. It requires billions of dollars in R&D, research and development. It requires decades of experience and relationships with governments and airlines that span generations. So the entry barriers in this industry are very high. It's nearly impossible for new competitors to join the fray. Although there are some new players emerging. In Brazil, Embraer is gaining ground with its regional jets. They are known for reliability and innovation. In China, Comac is making waves with its C919 aircraft, which is designed to compete directly with Boeing and Airbus. It's already being deployed in domestic flights, but these companies still focus on smaller markets. For long-haul flights, it's still a duopoly, and Airbus alone cannot keep up with the demand. Take this year, for example. Airbus has a backlog of nearly 8,700 planes that it needs to deliver to airlines, 8,700. And these are existing orders. So while Airbus may revel in Boeing's failure, it cannot meet the demand for Boeing's planes. As for Boeing, it won't shut shop anytime soon. There may be regulatory trouble, but here's the thing that will make sure that Boeing stays afloat. The money they spend on lobbying. It's a well-known practice. Boeing lobbies hard in Washington. It shares a relationship with U.S. lawmakers. It has strong ties with the U.S. Congress, and it uses this to avoid oversight measures or regulatory scrutiny over its safety plans. Which brings us back to you, the consumer. What can you do? Well, first of all, be informed. Before booking a flight, check which aircraft it is, and you can do this. Most airlines display this information online. If they don't, you can ask for it. Second, raise your voice. Demand transparency and accountability. Companies like Boeing need to feel the pressure from their customers. And third, explore other options if you can. When flying regionally, you could consider carriers that use non-Boeing fleets, especially in Asia and Latin America. I know it does not sound like too much, but this is all that you can do as a customer. Ideally, avoiding a Boeing plane should not be your responsibility. It is the job of governments and regulatory bodies. They must ensure the safety of passengers. Can they do that in the new year? You won't be holding our breath for it. Now let's shift our attention to Yemen, a country ravaged by a civil war. India is facing a diplomatic crisis there. An Indian nurse is on the death row in Yemen. Her name is Nimisha Priya. She hails from the southern state of Kerala. In 2017, Nimisha Priya was imprisoned for the murder of a Yemeni citizen. 3 years later, in 2020, she was found guilty and sentenced to death, and now she has exhausted all legal avenues. Her appeals have been rejected by Yemen's president, Rashad al-Alimi. She could be executed in a month. Indian authorities find themselves in a race against time now. Can they save Nimisha Priya? Does she still have any options left? Our next report tells you.
The year was 2014. Nimisha Priya, an Indian nurse in Yemen, dreamed of a fresh start. She had spent 6 years in the country, working in Yemen's hospitals all those years to support her parents back in Kerala. They were daily wage labourers and they depended on their daughter's earnings in Yemen. Starting her own clinic would have helped the family, but instead it became their worst nightmare. Priya couldn't set up the clinic alone. She joined hands with Talal Abdo Mehdi, a local Yemeni citizen. Mehdi became Priya's business partner in the clinic, but their partnership soured quickly. Priya accused Mehdi of embezzling funds and torture. She claims Mehdi held her at gunpoint several times. He even took her passport, leaving her stranded in Yemen. Trapped in Yemen, Priya took a drastic step. She injected Mehdi with sedatives, hoping to retrieve her passport. But the plan went horribly wrong. An overdose ended up killing Mehdi. Priya was imprisoned in 2017 and sentenced to death in 2020. She appealed against the decision only to be turned down. This week, Yemen's President Rashad al-Alimi approved the death sentence. Nimisha Priya could now be executed in a month's time. Her only option is a payoff. The death penalty can be waived only if Mehdi's family agrees to pardon her. In exchange, they'll receive blood money as compensation. Priya's mother has been in Yemen negotiating the waiver of the death sentence with Mehdi's family. She's received financial assistance from social workers, and the Indian government too is doing its bit. But operating in Yemen is anything but easy. The civil war has left the country and its justice system fractured. There are no clear lines of authority. Negotiating the payoff has been difficult. The Indian embassy in Yemen engaged a lawyer for the case. He demanded a fee of about $40,000. So far, only half that amount has been paid. But the lawyer wants the entire payment up front for the negotiations to continue. The situation highlights the current state of affairs in Yemen. It wasn't always this way. India and Yemen share a deep historical and cultural relationship. The ties date back several centuries. India was an early supporter of Yemen's independence from the British. But when the civil war broke out in 2015, everything changed. India imposed a travel ban on Yemen and launched a massive evacuation mission. Over 4,000 Indians were rescued, most of them were nurses. Since then, the civil war has cast a shadow on this relationship. The conflict is now escalating. With Israel ramping up its attacks on the Houthis, this expanding war adds new obstacles in securing the release of Nimisha Priya.
Our next story is from the Caribbean, from the twin island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. The country has declared a state of emergency. The military has been mobilized. They will act as a secondary police force. Security forces have been given additional powers. They will be allowed to conduct searches without a warrant. They can detain suspects without charge and deny them bail. It's a full-scale crackdown. And the reason is a surge in gang violence. Our next report has the details.
Certain criminal gangs, and I will leave out the places where at this stage, but I can say throughout Trinidad and possibly Tobago, are likely to immediately increase their brazen acts of violence in reprisal shootings on a scale so extensive that it threatens persons and will endanger public safety.
An assassination attempt, a retaliatory shootout, and 6 people killed. It was a weekend of gang violence in Trinidad and Tobago, and it has led to the authorities declaring a state of emergency. It began on Saturday. A known gang leader was leaving a police station in the capital, Port of Spain. His identity has not been made public. While he was leaving the police station, there was an attempt on his life. The gang leader managed to survive, but one of his crew members was killed. On Sunday, there was a reprisal. 5 people were gunned down inside a shop. These incidents have the potential to start off a vicious cycle of killings. That is why Trinidad and Tobago's government has declared an emergency.
At this stage, the government has taken the decision there is not going to be any curfew. That decision is because the targeting of this national public state of emergency is on those who engage in criminal activity with criminal intent.
Trinidad and Tobago's military has been deployed. The police have been given enhanced powers. They can search people and property without a warrant. They can detain someone for 2 days on suspicion alone. The suspects can also be denied bail. All of this isn't just a result of this weekend's events. Trinidad and Tobago is a hotspot for gang violence and murder. The Caribbean nation has one of the highest murder rates in the world. It has only about 1.5 million residents, but this year the official homicide count hit 623. It's the worst on record. This alarming figure was part of the reason for the emergency declaration. How did things get so bad in Trinidad and Tobago? The simple answer is drugs. The country is located right off the coast of Venezuela. It makes it a transit point for Venezuelan drugs, which then make their way to either the US or Europe. Gangs in Trinidad and Tobago serve as the middlemen. Where are they getting these weapons? Mostly the US. The US Government Accountability Office published a report this year. It analyzed about 7,500 guns that were confiscated in the Caribbean. Around 73% of them originated in the US. These American weapons are fueling gang violence in Trinidad and Tobago and other nations as well. Most infamously, Haiti, which is also overrun with gangs. The US is the world's biggest market for drugs. The US's insatiable appetite for cocaine and other drugs has wreaked havoc in the Caribbean. And this emergency in Trinidad and Tobago is a direct result of it. This isn't the first time the country has had to impose an emergency to combat gang violence. They did so in 2011 as well. Let's see how long this latest emergency lasts, and if it can really bring Trinidad and Tobago's gang violence problem under control.
Tonight is the night, New Year's Eve. It's your time to have some mandatory fun, though not at the same time, because there are 39 different local time zones across the globe. Some differ by 15 minutes and some are more than 12 hours apart. So fun fact, it will take 26 hours for the entire world to welcome the new year. Starting with Kiribati. This is an island country in the Pacific Ocean. They were the first to kick off 2025 at just 3:30 p.m. today, India time, followed by New Zealand along with some parts of Antarctica. As the clock ticked forward, celebrations began in the east, starting with Japan and the Koreas at about 8:30 p.m. India time. Bangladesh, Nepal, and India will follow. Finally, the new year will make its last stop in Hawaii and other remote islands in the US. They will be among the last places to welcome 2025. They will have to wait until tomorrow afternoon to pop the champagne. But no matter where you are, here is your survival guide for the New Year's Eve. For starters, think twice before you embark on a night out. Anticipate self-created hysteria, jacked up car prices, and a barrage of restrictions, from route diversions to shutdowns. And if you're planning to attend a party, you will need a pre-party to-do list. According to experts, first, find your signature offering, like food or a bottle of alcohol. Second, go in with a plan. Greet the host, know your limits, and watch the clock. Third, always have an exit strategy. Know when you're leaving and where you're going afterwards, though not at the same time. And importantly, how you plan to leave. You have to know that. Basically, you have to have a goodbye strategy. You will want to make small talk, give an apologetic smile, and say goodbye. At best, sentiments may be hurt. At worst, people will say not so soon and drag you down another conversational spiral. Now, according to a study, an average party goodbye takes about 45 minutes. Leaving parties without saying goodbye can save about 2 days per year. So don't be afraid to do the Irish goodbye, meaning leave a social gathering without saying goodbye. And yes, the name is slightly problematic. It is an unfortunate stereotype. But you can take your pick from a buffet of goodbye insults. Since 1751, the English have called it the French leave. Since the 1800s, the French have called it filet à l'anglaise, or the English exit. The whole idea is to pin poor behavior on your foes. That is, if you think that leaving without saying goodbye is bad. In that case, there is the South Asian goodbye too, where you bid farewell, then hang by the door and make unending conversation. You can level up as well with a Jewish goodbye. The last Jewish exodus was thousands of years ago when Moses apparently parted the Red Sea. Since then, the Jews have been in no rush to leave. That is the stereotype, that the Jews say goodbye and don't leave. So that's your final option, though it doesn't come highly recommended. But antisocial behavior does not have to be limited to leaving parties. If you don't want to go out, here is a completely made-up guide to excuses. If you're in India, use the Delhi cop-out. Arrive 5 minutes before the countdown begins and blame the traffic. If you're in Japan, deploy the Etorofu excuse, inspired by Japan's hard-to-reach northernmost point. Say that you're simply too far away and then don't show up. But if you must, the Macau masterstroke is your best bet. As soon as you enter a gathering, bet money on who will leave first, then bet on yourself and leave and win the money in the process. After all, New Year's Eve is the survival of the fittest. So clench your jaws, roll up your sleeves, and enjoy yourself. But even if you don't, remember, it's only the end of the year, not the end of the world. And as we gear up to welcome the new year, let's meet the men and women who will be making headlines. There's a whole new bunch of them because 2024 was the year of elections. 73 countries voted to choose new leaders. And they shook up global politics. The result is this: the class of 2025, with some old faces holding their positions firm and some new ones fighting to find their footing. So who will be in the spotlight this year? Who will rewrite the rule book? And how will they change global dynamics? Let's introduce you to the class of 2025. 2024 was the year of elections. 73 countries went to polls. Over half of the world's population voted. That means 4 billion people decided who stays and who goes. Some leaders held on to their chairs, others fell off. For a few, it felt like a chaotic game of musical chairs. Governments collapsed, regimes toppled, and the result? A whole new set of men and women calling the shots. 2025 brings with it a new class of leaders, the class of 2025. And this is not your average school. This is a school of geopolitics. Here, every canteen scuffle can escalate into a trade war, every detention slip can spark international chaos, and even casual disagreements can lead to high-stakes summits. So what does this new class look like? Who will rise to the top? Who will struggle to leave a mark? And how will these leaders navigate their volatile, ever-changing campus? Let's start with a popular boy of the school. He's friends with everyone, the global south, developed nations, emerging powers, all of them. He is advocating for peace. His extracurriculars are on point, but make no mistake, he's still scoring the top marks in economics. It's India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The canteen has had 2 camps since 2022, but Prime Minister Modi sits with both of them. Known as the King of Quad, Modi's popularity is unmatched. He won the elections in 2024, the 3rd straight term running. Everyone wants a seat with him, but there's some trouble in his vicinity, on the benches around him. A lot of their occupants have changed and tensions are simmering. But 2025 is the year to move forward, to strengthen alliances in the class while keeping peace at his table. That will be the goal this year. And while Modi is popular, one of his neighbors is just overconfident. He used to be the next big thing. Now he thinks he's unstoppable. That's Chinese President Xi Jinping. Always wanted to be the captain, always wanted to lead the school. But his problem is, he does not understand boundaries. He keeps crossing them. His pet peeves include cartoon bears. And that means honey in the school cafeteria is a big no. Clapping during his speeches is mandatory. You cannot criticize him. And if you're his friend, beware. Apparently, they don't return after a school year. Now, Xi Jinping does not like being challenged, but there is someone in school who just loves to do it. It's the school bully. US President-elect Donald Trump. He doesn't listen to anyone. He doesn't abide by rules. He treats the school like his personal empire. So Trump is back to his antics. He's taking claim to his classmates' his properties. He's constantly challenging teachers. He even threatened to start his own school. And joining him in all of this is his new BFF, Elon Musk. The duo seem unstoppable right now. And despite the punishment-worthy antics, Trump's fan club just keeps growing bigger. So in 2025, expect more fireworks from him. There will be creative nicknames, raging fights, and threats to sue the school. Nothing is out of bounds for Donald Trump. Guess who's the one person he really likes, almost adores? It's the school tough guy, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. He doesn't follow the school rules either. He makes his own. No one dares to sit in Putin's seat. He's had it for a quarter of a century. He's the guy who wrestles with bears in gym class and always comes to school in a motorcade. His motto is clear: strength is everything. Right now, he is a little preoccupied though. His priority is a special military operation in Ukraine. Basically, while keeping his own bench, he also wants to occupy the bench of his neighbor, Zelensky. Of course, Zelensky did not take it well, but Putin believes it's all necessary. And this has gone on for 3 years. 2025 could be the year when they finally settle it. But it'll only happen if it happens on Putin's terms. Else, the war goes on. And while the whole school may be scared of Putin, here's someone they're never afraid of: the class clown. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He is the drama club's favorite member. But for everyone else, he's a bit too much. Whether doing viral dances or tripping over his own progressive slogans, Trudeau keeps the mood light. Some laugh with him, others laugh at him. But one thing's for sure, he is the master of theatrics. When his popularity sinks, he starts complaining and hurling accusations. Does he offer proof? No. But does he keep doing it? Yes. And his favorite target It's obviously the school's popular boy. But Trudeau is now hanging by a thread. His charges are not helping his grades, his ratings are slipping, and soon he could drop out of class. And that's what happens when you don't do your homework and complain about others. So we've met the popular boy, the bully and the clown, but every school needs an enforcer, which brings us to the head girl, someone who sticks to the rules. That is Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister. She's already broken the glass ceiling. She's the first female Prime Minister of her country, and she's a stickler for tradition. Meloni loves the rules. But they have to be her rules. Her vision is clear: make Italy great again. And if there's one thing she hates, it's students from other classes. She does not want to let them in. Some detractors whisper about her being too bossy, but the head girl, she doesn't care. She's got a vision board and she plans to stick to it. Plus, some of her neighbors in Europe are struggling, so she may have to lead the whole bunch of them. Which brings us to the rebel, the longest-serving member of the school, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, more than 17 years in power. Netanyahu had a mixed year in 2024. Some wins, some losses, and a lot of criticism. None of it seems to bother him, though. He may have multiple honor code violations, but he always insists that it's a major conspiracy. Netanyahu breaks every rule in the handbook. His assigned seat in class keeps mysteriously expanding, especially to include neighboring desks. And when asked about it, he says he must do it for security reasons. 2025 could have been his year of reckoning, but his friend Donald Trump is back in the fray, so it could easily be more of the same. Next on our list is the overambitious one, someone who wants to do it all. That's Recep Tayyip Erdogan for you. The Turkish president aims high. He wants to be part of all alliances. He touts infrastructure projects, but his economics is often a little weak, and that seems to be holding him back. Not this year, though. In 2025, Erdogan is aiming even higher, and that's because of a new kid in school. HTS's Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, the current leader of Syria. He used to be in a different school. He had a controversial transfer. His previous school records are mysteriously unavailable. And now Jolani has one job. He wants to convince everyone that he has changed. He's trying to reinvent himself, repackage himself. He has grand plans. He wants to be a pragmatic student leader, and Erdogan is helping him. So a new kid being helped by an old one, that's some classic school dynamics. And you know what else this class has? Dreamers, wildcards, and obviously the troublemakers. Let's meet them one by one. First, the big dreamer, that's Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, also the kingdom's de facto ruler. MBS always has proposals. The teacher may want a simple essay, but he wants a mega campus. His dreams are larger than life, and he's constantly pitching new ideas to modernize everything. Some admire his vision, others doubt his ways, especially the means he uses to get things done. Either way, he's always aiming for the stars, and in 2025, expect more of that. Maybe another World Cup bid, another art museum, another mega city. Nothing is too much for MBS. Then we have the wild card, Javier Milei, the Argentinian president. Every class has that one unpredictable student. And that's Milei for the class of 2025. He could either ace the test or set the lab on fire. With his wild hair and even wilder ideas, he is polarizing. But some of his ideas do work. Off late, he's been acing economics. The score is impressive. Just don't ask him to explain his economic theories. It'll take all afternoon, and he may arrive with a chainsaw. Last but not the least, we have the troublemaker. In the class of 2025, it's Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator, always sneaking fireworks into school and claiming that they're for science. He loves causing a stir and thrives on attention. His latest stunt, claiming that he built a rocket that can hit the principal's office. It has everyone rolling their eyes, but the troublemaker doesn't care. He's having way too much fun. So that's the class of 2025 for you, a diverse mix of characters, making, bending and breaking rules all the time, getting into scuffles, forging friendships, and then standing together every once in a while for the class photo. We'll keep an eye on them, and you can track the class of 2025 right here on Firstpost. It's time for part 2 of Jokes of the Year. India had general elections between the months of April and June. We saw the usual speeches and rallies, but we also saw a new campaign tool, memes. Even Prime Minister Modi joined in on the fun, reposting a meme of himself dancing. Over in the UK, King Charles had an interesting year. He unveiled his official portrait, which frankly looked like Picasso robbed a blood bank. Later in the year, he visited Samoa, where he got high on the local brew. Truly the king of good times. And don't forget the new cardio move of 2024. Forget jumping jacks. The new routine is jumping musks. A giddy Elon Musk hopping around Donald Trump. He's hoping 2025 will give us even more LOL moments. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. New Zealand ushers in the new year with a grand fireworks display. Over 1 million people gather at the Sydney harbour for the midnight fireworks, and dazzling lanterns light up the night sky in China's Shanghai on New Year's Eve. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1999, the US officially handed over the Panama Canal to Panama. The handover fulfilled the terms of a 1977 treaty. The Panama Canal is a crucial waterway linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It was built by the US and it was under its control since 1914. The handover marked a new chapter in US-Panama relations. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Wish you all a Happy New Year.